Now we're going to start with just a brief introduction by name with each candidate, but we're not going to go into all the bios of each. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opportunity to answer the same question. So before we do that, running for mayor, we have Lindsay Bell, Marlon Kirkendall. For council, Steve Blair, Alan Dubiel, Ellie Lawmark. Do you go by Laura sometimes, Ellie? I'm just kidding. Craig Lozelle, Len Scamardo, and Gene Wilcox. So, we will start with one question each will answer. Why are you running? 2 minutes. The timer's in back. We're going to stick to the timer. With 8 people, we can't afford not to. So there's going to be a beep, beep, beep when it's done. And when it's done, stop. Put the mic down.
How do you turn these on?
They're on.
Sound amp. Get a sound amp.
Oh, it's got a sound. Okay.
Is it
They're on.
Sandy in the back as the timer?
They're all on. They're all live. So when you're snickering to your table mate over there, just remember that. We've had that happen before. It actually adds to the excitement. So you will each answer why you're running, 2 minutes. And then we're going to go to a round of 3 yes or no questions. Real simple. Ask the question, go right down the line, yes or no. If you don't want to answer it, say I'm not going to answer it. They're all yes or no. There's no explanation. There's no it depends or what is. What is, okay. Then, after we get the yes-no questions, this is when it comes fun. We have 8 prepared questions prepared by our sponsors. I'm going to read the first question, and then I'm going to pull a name out of the cup. That person will be asked to address that question, and they will have 2 minutes. At the end of that 2 minutes, the person who answered that question can pass the question to whomever they want. Okay? So if Lindsay gets a question and she answers it, she says, well, I'd like to hear what Marlon has to say about that. Passes the question to whomever you want. After that, you will notice that each candidate has 2 little giant Hershey's Kisses in front of them. Anybody else who wants to, no, don't throw them, they're pretty heavy. And they're plaster, by the way. Anybody else who wants to add to the question, or add to the answer, or say something differently, will have the opportunity to do that. They don't have to, but they can. Bearing in mind, they only have 2 chances to do that. There are 8 questions. You can't jump into all 8. So if we reach around where all the rebuttals are gone, or nobody rebuts, then we'll put everybody's name back in the hat, and then we can do that. So we're trying to encourage interaction here rather than read the question, everybody answers. Read the next question, everybody answers. I think we've all seen forums where that's usually the standard activity. So, and if we get confused, I'll just confuse it more for you. So we're going to start with the first question everybody will be answering, starting with Lindsay. Why are you running? 2 minutes.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'm running because I want to help build a strong future for the city of Prescott, for everybody's hometown. Prescott has been my hometown for 40 years. This is where my kids were born and where they were raised, and where several of my grandchildren are growing up as well. It's a great community, wonderful amenities, good community relationships, wonderful place to raise a family. But you know, over the last few years, like many communities, our hometown is facing some challenges. City revenues are still down from before the recession. Businesses have closed. Our schools are certainly still struggling. Unemployment is still persistently high. And young people tend to have few options for staying here and raising their families here. We can do better. We have to do better if we want to assure a strong future for the city, for our children, for our grandchildren, and future generations. It's time to step up the leadership, and I think I can help with that process. I'll mention a couple of areas where we can do better. Open space. In the 13 years since the community passed the Open Space Initiative, the city has spent about 17 million out of the 40 million set aside. We can do better. Over the last 20 years, there have been a number of studies that suggest the need for transit in this area. We have a good plan that's feasible, doable, and affordable, but where's the leadership on transit? Water, arguably one of the most important issues at a time when we should be talking with our neighbors. We're having fewer conversations and emphasizing the divisions between us. It's time to step up the leadership. I think I can make a positive contribution to that process, and I would be honored to serve as your mayor. Thank you.
Nicely timed. Marlon,
Ready?
I'm ready.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening. Not loud enough? This going to be better? Okay.
Yes.
Again, thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening. I think this year, probably more than any year that I remember for a long time, that there is a very distinct difference in the candidates for mayor. But what I would like to do is continue some of the good things that have been happening, and I'm going to read from the editorial in yesterday's Courier, because it says an awful lot of what the council that you're looking at here has been doing. It says, Prescott proactive in avoiding pitfalls. Over the past few years now, local residents have heard about the challenges the city of Prescott has been facing, including but not limited to increased benefit costs for its employees, the need to adjust retirement bonuses or severance packages, efforts to thaw frozen wages, growing its water portfolio, going from declining to now recovering sales tax revenues, cutting of staffing levels, and spending of the open space roads sales tax revenue more on roads than property acquisition. Some chalk these up to the effects of the Great Recessions. Others call it mismanagement on the part of the city's leaders and council. On the flip side, we see the city's ever-improving credit rating and its overall improvement in indebtedness now that Willow and Watson Lakes were paid off. Contract Prescott's position to that of the city of Detroit, which famously declared bankruptcy last week. Is Prescott in danger of emulating Detroit? Absolutely not, far from it. In recent years, Prescott City Manager Craig McConnell called for a new approach to the budget process. Reviews of each department gave council members insight, even history lessons, into the challenges each is facing.
Thank you, Mayor.
All done?
We're up, we're finished.
Got it.
Steve Blair.
Thank you for coming and thank you for inviting me. I'm Steve Blair. And, the reason why I'm running again is Prescott's near and dear to my heart as somebody that's a true native, born and raised here in Prescott and born up on Marina Street. They've closed that facility down. I'm waiting for them to name it for me, but they're going to tear it down instead, I think. But thank you for being here. I appreciate the people that are out there and the people that are listening. I think we've made some big strides at the city of Prescott over the past 4 years. They've been very tough strides. We've been in an economy that's been difficult, and we've weathered the storm pretty well. We've been fiscal conservatives on the council. We've watched our money. We haven't laid anybody off other than the folks that have gone away through attrition. We're very healthy now. Things are looking better. We've spent a lot of money on infrastructure. Some would say we've been ill serving the community on not buying open space, but I would challenge anybody to believe that we would scrap a road project like Park Avenue at $5.6 million, sewer, water, road surface, and trade it off for a piece of open space for $4.6 million. I think you have to do the right thing for the majority of the people in this community. That's what I was elected to do, elected to make hard decisions, and I make those decisions not only short term, but long term. I've been associated with the water issues in this community. When I was on Planning Commission dating back to 1996, I've been involved with the water, with SRP, with ADWR, with Prescott Valley, Chino Valley. We've got a lot of neat stuff in place right now. We've got a meeting this week, or next week, to talk about micro and rainwater harvesting out of Chino Valley. I believe there's things that we can do that are different than what we've done in the past, and I look forward to your vote, and hopefully I can make a difference. If you're out there and kind enough to give me a vote, I will be glad to serve another term. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before we go Alan, I
Yes.
just want everybody, can everybody see the 15-second warning in the back row there? Just so you're not caught unaware. And the timer will go off and you will be asked to stop. Alan DeBeal.
I think you said that because, I was going to speak and I usually run over. Thank you, Alan. Good evening. I'm Alan DeBeal, and as to the question as to why I'm running, it's very simple. It's for the people, to allow the people to have a voice in the decisions of the city. I've seen too often where the citizens have spoken, have asked questions, and there has been no impact on the decisions being made. I believe that we need to go back to a study session to allow the time prior to the voting session for the input that's provided by the people to have an impact on the council people during that week in between. To me, it's most essential that we have an open government that's open-minded, that listens, that studies the issues, not just from the staff perspective, but from the citizens' perspective. So many people have come here with vast life experiences. Those are what we all need to have to form us, to get us a better view of what's needed, to allow us to make the better choices in the future. To me, it's most important that not only you vote, and obviously you will, you're here, but that you participate beyond that. In order to have a council that will listen, we need a public that will present the ideas. And to me, I've seen the council meetings having diminished attendance. That to me shows that the people are discouraged as to their ability to have an impact. That to me is what we need to allow the public to be re-energized, to come to the meetings with the ability to feel that they'll have an impact on those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Ellie Lawmark.
Ellie Lawmark, good evening, and thank you for coming. It's important to have these open forums to have an opportunity to discuss issues that are important to our future. I'm running because the Gallup poll that was done in 2009, the Arizona We Want, indicated that the citizens of Prescott, 97%, did not feel their elected officials were representing them. And I think when you look at the local area, some of that is true. The voter initiative on open space has largely not been enacted. The voter initiative and Proposition 401, considering the Big Chino, has been put aside and ignored. And voters concerned about sustainable growth and safe water yield for the community, plans have not been enacted to ensure that we have water for future growth in our community. And recently, we've had a lot of concerns about water quality. We have 4 creeks in the area that are impaired. We have 2 lakes, Watson and Willow, that are impaired. And now we know we also have Pure Wafer that has been discharging one of the most hazardous chemicals on the earth into our water system and into our air. And there was no discharge waste plan monitoring, nothing to prevent this from happening. We needed to wait for the Department of Environmental Quality to come in and find the facility. This is not preserving the public trust and protecting the safety of the residents of Prescott to allow this to happen. Yes, the city has made some great, some forward steps in water conservation. The revenues have grown, and certainly some of the candidates will say, this is an issue, open space is an either-or issue. We can't balance the budget and have open space. That's not true.
Thank you, Ellie. Greg Lizelle.
Thank you, Malcolm. I feel like I'm in a congressional hearing right now. I'm interviewing Eric Holder. My name's Greg Lizelle. I'm running for city council. for the fact that I've been a resident here for going on 14 years. I have a wife, my parents live here, I have 2 daughters here. One goes to college here, the other is getting ready to enter the 8th grade and into high school. I feel that up to 4 years ago, we were in our heyday. We had lots of money, revenue coming in, we had lots of choices on how the direction this town needs to go. But right now, we are in the black. We're barely in the black. Rest of the country, we should be a role model of how you run a sound ship, because right now, we're running a sound ship. We need to continue that. I want to be part of that team to continue a fiscally conservative city. That's the only way we're going to be sustainable and go into the future. We only have so much money. Those monies should be spent for basic services, fire, police, sewer, infrastructure, whatever's left, which is not a lot. Then we go into the ones. But right now, we need to stay on task and stay with the needs. Thank you.
Okay, Len Scamardo.
Okay, thank you. I'm the one guy who was twice served on the city council with never being elected. So there were two separate councils that did it. And they basically told me after that they selected me because of the experience of having done a dumb thing in the early 90s when I moved to Prescott by talking to Dayton Redkowski, who was the mayor, and said to me, with your experience, you ought to be on one of our commissions, and he appointed me to the Board of Adjustment. And then I went from the Board of Adjustment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which I was on, and I was chairman a number of years before I was selected for this last term to replace John Hanna when he resigned. So I feel that I've got the experience. I also understand the city charter type of business better than somebody coming from back east who you went to your councilman because you wanted to get your kid a job for the summer. Prescott has a city manager. The manager, the city clerk, the city attorney are all employees of the council. That's the council's extent of who we control. We have had the unfortunate or fortunate experience in the last 2 years where we lost our city manager, deputy manager, city attorney, and a number of others, and the city clerk through a number of reasons, and we've had to replace them, and I think we've got a great team in place. As far as fiscal responsibility, I understand my position of setting policy and working on budgets, and I don't want to get into the Public Works Department about a pothole in front of my neighbor's yard that he's telling me we ought to get fixed. So, and why have one of my neighbors sitting here? So I believe that I have the experience to continue working for the city and making sure they have the basic services that they deserve. Thank you all.
Thank you, Len. Gene Wilcox.
Thank you. I'm running because I have been a long-time student of government and participant of government, and I feel very strongly that government in our country is the answer and not the solution. It must be responsive and effective. It should work for us, not against us. And I really want to be part of making the decisions that make that possible in this community. This is a wonderful city, wonderful community, and I would like to contribute toward it. I've worked for most of my legal career as a legal advisor to local governments. I'm no stranger to Arizona, no stranger to Arizona government, although I have recently moved to Prescott. I've been for 20 years in Flagstaff, a community that is very similar size with similar issues. And one thing I realize now is that the council has done a good job of being fiscally conservative, and they have balanced the budget. But also our economy is starting to get better. We are just now turning the corner and seeing things like the sales tax increase, property values increase. And it's time to get back to thinking to the future of Prescott. There are some critical decisions coming up in the next few years. The adoption of the update to the general plan, a water management plan. I would like to be part of those things. We need to consider regional economic development so that we can diversify our economy and provide better paying jobs and opportunities for young people
in the community. I moved here as a fixed income retiree like many other people, but I do believe that a community can only thrive if it nurtures its young and provides them opportunities. And I think government is one means of doing that.
Thank you, Jean. All right, rapid fire questions, yes or no? They're through. I'm going to start with Jean on the far end. We're going to run right by. I don't need to repeat the question, hopefully. I'd like you to please answer, if you can, yes or no. First question, starting with Jean. Is the city of Prescott spending enough money on open space?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Question number 2, starting with Lindsay. Work the other way. Is there a transparency issue with the city of Prescott?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Question number 3, starting with Jean. Do you support the Chino pipeline in its current form?
No.
Yes.
I'd rather not answer.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
All right. If we could get about 100 of those and just keep going back and forth, that'd be kind of fun, right? Okay, we are going to start with the first question. Currently, our police and fire services are paid through general sales tax revenues. Do you support an alternate funding source for these services? And if so, what might that be? And if not, why? Lindsay Bell.
The reality is that municipalities need to rely on local sales tax to support the majority of their services, including police and fire. And unless state law changes a lot, I think that we need to continue with supporting our police and fire services with sales tax revenues. So it will always be a challenge for the city to make sure that we bring in enough sales tax revenues and that we maintain the revenue stream sufficient to support all of the public safety needs that our community has and that our citizens desire and want. So I think we have to stick with that sales tax.
Would you like to direct that question to another candidate?
I'll take it, thank you.
Well, Lindsay, would you like to direct it to Marlon?
I'm happy to have Marlon
All right.
respond.
1 minute now.
For 4 years, we've been challenged by that same issue, Mal. And it's very difficult. 68% of our total general fund revenue comes in from sales tax, which means that we as a community have to support our business establishments and make them be able to generate enough sales that we can do that. Taking that 68% of the general fund, 88% of that 68% is used up by public safety, and it's very difficult. However, you can see in our surrounding communities that their fire service is provided by Central Yavapai Fire District. The average $200,000 home, or maybe even a little bit less, is almost $500 a month just for that on their property tax bill. So I don't think that our community is ready for another $400 to $500 on their property tax bill as an add-on for public safety.
Thank you. Now, those who want to opt in, be sure, I see two, Steve and Alan are there.
Yeah.
You're back. Ellie, have you got one up? You're kind of the back of the, pull them back.
Pull them back.
There you go. Okay, Alan DeVille was the first up.
I support an additional revenue source, not an alternate revenue source. And that additional revenue source that I would propose that the citizens vote on is a portion of that 0.25% that after 2015 is not being used for the roads. That's had been roads and open space at 1%. After 2015, it goes to 0.75% for your sales tax. So I would propose a structured vote on what portion of that should be used for an additional revenue source for public safety. Because the only way that I've heard you can do it otherwise is for property taxes, and I don't believe that's the correct solution.
Steve Blair.
Real quick, we have funding sources that stand on their own when it comes to water, sewer, all those things, the trash pickup, all those things are revenue neutral. They pay for themselves through fees. The fire department, the police department, which is our most important entity, is in my opinion in the community, is about $17 million. And we need to find a legitimate funding source. If it's 1%, 1% will bring in roughly about $12 million. We need to find a percentage that brings in a solid revenue stream to offset what we're doing today. We just don't have the funds to do the library, the recreation department, all the things. And if you take the things that are important to this city in order, police, fire, water, sewer, trash, they're number one on the list. We need to find a permanent source for the fire and the police department.
Okay, no more opt-ins? I don't see any more kisses.
You want some kisses?
There we go. Lynn, are your opt-ins?
No, he's back.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. If you could raise, lower, implement, or eliminate any tax, fee, or fine, what change would you make? Does everybody understand that? You're close to fine. Len Scamardo.
Well, thank you. I was saying a little prayer at this one. If I was going to revise one of the taxes, and we don't call them taxes when you talk about impact fees, with the contractors today, so they're not going to like what I say. But as a former general contractor and developer and commercial real estate, whatever, impact fees currently mandated by the state, charged by the city, are causing the city a tremendous amount of accounting changes in order to get districts, because this community had streets that were back in 1905 or 10 or 15, and their rate's going to be different. But on impact fees, if you walk in to get a building permit, and I've got a young kid just out of ASU, got his first job working in the accounting department at Yavapai Medical Center, and he wants a starter home, he gets hit with a $15,500 impact fee. And on the other arm, I've got an individual, I'm going to build $1.5 million house in the Hacienda or Prescott Lakes, and he has the same $15,500 impact fee. I don't think it's right. I think it should be based the way normal building permits are, and that's based on the total value of the property. And that if I had an opportunity to change it, I'd get the legislature to change that one, to let the cities establish their own rates rather than mandating how we have to do it.
Then would you like to assign that to another candidate?
I'm going to talk to my lawyer friend next to me. She's probably got a good answer.
All right, Gene.
Well, I have the same view about impact fees. One additional change I would make is that I think we need to lower impact fees for higher density development, for multifamily housing, and for what we call workforce housing, which really goes to the point that Len made.
Greg.
I also would like to address the impact fees, but in another.
Greg Wazell.
Thanks, Malcolm. I believe in tax incentives. it helps the growth of the community. Now, which ones get tax incentives, that's a matter of contention. A lot of them say, oh, you give them to the low wage retail boxes when they come in. I think it should be, we should lean towards more of a manufacturing, like a Ruger company coming into town, or some sort of small manufacturing, or a higher skilled job. And that's where I'm not eliminating retail establishments, but I think we should look more towards manufacturing and try to solicit those folks.
And Greg, would you like to assign that to another candidate? Alan?
Okay,
Alan DeVille.
I won't have to use my little kiss here.
No, you don't.
Greg, that's a wonderful idea in that regard. The fact that retail here should come here for customers, and I don't believe in a monetary incentive for that, but there are other incentives that could be offered. We have the ability on rezoning, we have the ability on regulations, we have the ability on how fast we push through building permits. We have those types of things which can incentivize a retail to come here. And in terms of the commercial aspect, the light industry, which we desperately need to improve and increase their desire to come here, that, of course, we would have to balance off. What is the value of the jobs they offer to us? Not only for the people they bring in and the new people, the amount they would spend on homes, but also hopefully, and that would be a prime objective, would be to allow...
Thank you, Alan. Lindsay Bell.
I also agree that incentives are a good tool for the city to use to promote its economic development objectives. And I think they don't always have to be, as Alan says, economic incentives, but I always prefer the carrot to the stick as opposed to discouraging certain types of development through more regulation. But I have some criteria that I usually apply when I'm trying to decide if this particular incentive package makes sense. First of all, it has to further city goals, establish city goals, whether that's bringing in quality jobs or retaining the revenue stream or enhancing the revenue stream coming into the city. It needs to represent a good return on investment and hopefully can be done in a way that has few negative impacts to neighboring properties and to the environment in the area.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any other opt-ins?
Yeah. What do you put the silver one out?
Just take your pick, whatever tricks your fancy.
Are we right now? The Prescott and our neighboring community at one time was very heavy in incentives to attract retail business. And usually that was some type of formula sharing the sales tax. And we probably read just the last couple of days that our neighbor to the east is negotiating with a developer, a commercial developer, to extend their sales tax sharing for until 2028, I believe, in return for some open space. That makes it very difficult for our community to share their sales tax, particularly since that's our major source of revenue today. So I think those days are gone. So we've only got 15 seconds, and this is a long story. But
Thank you, Merlin. Anybody else? Okay, next question. If you do not support the construction of the Big Chino water line, what suggestions do you propose to supply water to the region in the future to achieve safe yield? Steve Blair.
I guess I can pass that question because I believe in the Chino pipeline, but I'll use my time to tell you why. The bottom line is we have got to bring in water to reach safe fuel and also to bring in water for development. The city of Prescott knows exactly what the build-out's going to be in the future. All the lots have been platted. We know exactly what that number is. We need to have the water for the future for a development of different industries. If we think we're just going to keep sucking water out of the Little Chino and eventually not have a cone of depression and cause other problems within our aquifer, we're fooling ourselves. I believe the responsible way is to bring in water from Big Chino, to alternate the Dugan, the Weber well, the Chino well field, the Chino fields, and to spread them out so that we're not using any of those sources and overtaxing the environment underground. And we don't know for certain what's underground. There's different commissions that were done with the U of A back in the day where it said we have 400 years of water underground. USGS just got done with a report saying we need further studies. SRP has now joined hands with Prescott Valley to say they believe in more studies to make the understanding of what the Big Chino is doing and how it affects the birdie an important outcome. So I do support the Big Chino. That's where our water is going to come from in the future. We know our build out is going to be capped at a certain level, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Steve, would you like to hand that question off?
I would, to Ellie.
Does that count as one of my kisses then? Okay, thank you.
We have plenty of kisses.
I support going after some of the water in the Big Chino, but only if it doesn't have any effect on the Verde. And we need to look at the USGS survey model to look at what that effect would be. We can't bury our head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. The Salt River Project has a right to the water in the Verde. We have a right to the water in the Big Chino aquifer. The agreement between the two, us and them, requires that there be no mitigating effect on the Verde. So it only makes sense, rather than just going for the Big Chino, is to have a mitigation plan at the same time, so we don't spend all of our money in court with the Salt River Project, arguing over the water in the Verde and the effects of the Big Chino. It's important that there are some conservation efforts, there's other things the Bureau of Reclamation has identified as sources of water, rainwater harvesting, recapturing the effluent.
Thank you, Ellie.
That's it.
Alan DeBeal.
Contrary to that yes-no answer where it said in its present form, and I said no, the question is how do you change it so that it becomes not objectionable? And as Elliot said, we need to ensure that we're not affecting the headwaters of the Verde. We need a mitigation plan for that. We also need to have an idea as to who is using that water, and those are the individual developments that should be paying for that water. Contrary to what Steve said, however, there is unplatted 12,000 plus dwelling units within the city as it exists right now. They have no water set aside. That's up to 4,300 acre feet, also including the groundwater lots. That amount of water has been not saved for the development to come in the city, but has been piece by piece committed in the future, particularly for Deep Well Ranch to settle a pipeline existing.
Thank you, Alan. Marlon Kirkendall.
Most of the folks here will remember 3 years ago, we were in court with SRP. We spent about $1.75 million in 1 year in several years on legal fees. We were able to, through a long-standing relationship, get out of the courthouse and work together, which is what we're doing now. SRP is sharing all of our exploration third with us, along with Prescott Valley. So there are no ongoing legal fees with SRP. Within a couple of weeks, we'll be adding the equipment to some of the existing wells out in the Big Chino, so that we can start developing more data and better science to use the USGS their, whatever, as a base to work from. And that's ongoing. I think we're in good shape. It'll be 8 to 10 years before there's any pumping, and we will have good data.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Blair.
Well, I'm going to use my last snack because I think water is the most important issue. And I want to share the fact that the city of Prescott purchased a water ranch for roughly $25 million and turned it into open space to keep development from happening out in the Big Chino. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. We preserved grasslands out there, about 5,000 acres that houses won't be built upon. We are preserving the aquifer in that way. We took 3,500 acre feet of historically irrigated waters that could have been used for development and set that aside to use it for safe field or mitigation. I want everybody to understand the city of Prescott cannot solely alone reach safe field in our aquifer. All the uncharted wells and the charted wells in the county, Prescott Valley and everybody else has to do their share. And until the state changes the laws and the rules, safe field will never be achieved because they can't achieve it in the county. We in the city of Prescott can achieve it, and we've demonstrated that.
Okay, any other opt-ins? Yes, Gene Wilcox.
Thank you. We don't know for sure that we can't achieve safe yield without the Big Chino pipeline. What I would like us to consider is, once we get the scientific data, run the USGS model, consider selling the Big Chino for the value of its water to the federal government, place it under a conservation easement. I know it sounds like a crazy idea. Consider it. We can use that money to develop an infrastructure that would harvest water within our own area. It will cost, yes, to put in an infrastructure to harvest water, but there's so much we can do with the rain that falls in the monsoon season and the snow that falls in the winter.
Thank you, Gene. Any other opt-ins? Helen.
Yes, I just want to say that recently Senators McCain and Flake have indicated encouraging us to work together with our partners in the Verde Valley and cooperate. Right now, the water advisory committees are falling apart. We're not working together because we don't trust one another. We have to trust the science and the Bureau of Reclamation studies. We also need to lobby our state and let the feds help us to make that whole area outside the Prescott active management area an active management area. So we don't have people coming in and mining the aquifers, selling our water off to the highest bidder. That was one of the problems with Representative Tobin's House Bill 3383, is any international company could come in and line themselves up to do that. We need to protect the water resources so they are there for the people and not the highest bidder.
Thank you, Ellie. Any other opt-ins for that? Yeah, I'm not missing any. Okay, next question. If a large non-retail employer were to locate outside the city limits of Prescott, what would the benefit be to the city of Prescott? Everybody understand that question? Okay. LA Law, Mark.
Thank you. We're a regional area. We're no longer just the town of Prescott. We're Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Dewey, Humboldt. We need to support regional economic growth. When people get jobs in Prescott Valley, they build houses. That creates jobs for everybody in the community. They buy goods and services here. We no longer can just think of ourselves as just a community in competition with our neighbors. We have to go together, regional economic development, to attract corporations here, to partner with our colleges and universities to get high-paid living wages here for younger families. Everybody, in my neighborhood, I have a fellow who works in Lake Havasu doing driving helicopters, flying. He lives here in Prescott because he's a mountain biker. So region, people work and play in different places, and we need to support each other in trying to develop all of our regional economic resources.
Ellie, would you like to direct that question to another candidate?
Great.
Thank you, Ellie. Trying to think what non-retail, and we can imagine what kind of business it would be. I mean, this is only, we're just imagining it's a manufacturer, hopefully paying great wages. If that's the case, most likely they're going to buy a home in Prescott, so there's an advantage there. We can always annex the area if they're in the county. I'm just kidding. I think we're a destination town. We have great restaurants, great activities at the square, like Ellie said, trails, and there is not a day that goes by that there is not something going on in Prescott. So we'd be attracting those folks and that business to come here, spend money, or live in our community. Thank you.
Lindsay Bell.
Well, as Ellie has already mentioned, we are definitely a regional market, especially when it comes to attracting business concerns that are non-retail business concerns. And the reason that the region wants to attract that is for good-paying jobs, jobs that pay a living wage and that you can support a household and a family on. If one of those comes into the region, it doesn't really matter if it locates in Prescott or Prescott Valley or on the reservation or in the unincorporated areas of the county. We still get the benefit from that because we have local people who live in the area, who can spend money in the area, who have disposable income because they have good, high-paying jobs. So that is a good thing to have a non-retail employer come in. We need to look at those kinds of things from a regional perspective. And that's especially true when we talk about the labor force, because the labor force is regional.
Thank you, Lindsay. Would anybody else like to opt in and address this question? Okay. Next question. Other than water and, understanding our current needs, how do you propose to prioritize street maintenance and development versus open space acquisition? I suppose we know who's left after this one. Marlon Kirkendall.
My first year in office, we set aside $500,000 for open space, and there was not a proposal brought to us, so we didn't use it. I think we used $60,000. The second year, we set aside $500,000. There was not a proposal brought forward. The third year, we set aside $500,000, and no proposal was brought forward. This last year, we set aside $500,000. This money does not carry forward. When a budget ends at the end of the year, when it's all over, we start over. There was a proposal of type that was brought forward, and a proposal was made to the city by the property owner that was way out of our range. We did not have the capacity to handle that. So there's one more year that they will be sharing of the 1 cent tax. And then in 2015, that portion that would be used for open space will disappear unless the open space folks, and I have offered the city's help in taking that proposal to the voters if they want to go forward and ask for 0.25% to be dedicated solely to open space. But it would be a voter proposal, and the public would have to vote for it. So that's still hanging out there. It's a way to generate money, but it's without question, the public would know what they were spending their money for.
Would you like to assign that to another candidate?
Well, Lindsay, can I have that one?
All right, Lindsay Bell.
Thank you, Marlon. I am certainly aware of the necessity to invest in our streets network. As a volunteer, I have engaged transportation planning, multimodal transportation planning in this community and in this region for 25 years. I'm known as a transit advocate, but I'm actually an advocate for multimodal transportation, complete streets. That means the highway network, as well as transit, as well as bike paths, as well as pedestrian. So I'm very aware of the importance of that. And over the 13 years since the proposition for streets and open space passed, I can buy that a year or two in there, we have to set the priority on the streets into that equation, but I can't buy it for 13 years in a row. We need to spend more of that money on open space acquisition. We have an opportunity with the Granite Dells Resort. We need to do that. That's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to acquire an amenity for the city.
Thank you, Lindsay. Would anybody else like to address this? Ellie?
When the Open Space Initiative was passed in 1999, there was a prioritized list of properties that the Open Space Alliance and other people came up with. Half of those have been purchased, half have not. We need to look at which properties can give Prescott the biggest bang for its buck. 40 to 50% of the tourists that come to our chamber are here for outdoor recreation. The off-road Whiskey Road Marathon bike race brought 15 to 20,000 people here to Prescott that weekend. It is improving our ecotourism, it's improving our sales tax revenues, it is extending our tourist season beyond the summer months into fall and spring. It is not why, we have to look at the future and where revenues come from, broadening our revenue stream, and it's not just all or nothing, one thing or the other.
Thank you, Ellie. Lynn, did I see you?
Yes, you did.
Lynn Scamarla.
I want to ask a question instead of answering one. How many in the audience know how many acres Prescott got to put in open space in the last couple of years for free? No one. Surprises me. Joe Baines with our Parks Department, along with the Planning and Zoning Commission approving developers' plans, has gotten over 300 acres as open space dedication in some of the new annexation areas that were approved out by the airport. He wanted these pieces, the developers granted him the open space because they wanted something. And they wanted a mixed use plan instead of designating their properties for one size house here and another size house here, and according to the zoning laws. So they wanted what's called a PAD, a planned area development, and in negotiations to get that, we got 25% of the space as open space, and it ties into our trail system, and this is not the only area that Joe used those powers to get open space for free.
Do we have any other opt-ins for this question? There being none, we're moving right along. How many people have opt-ins left? Raise your hand if you got one left. Okay, we got 4. All right. Last question.
Lift their round dog.
Or
No, Marlon's got it.
Marlon's got
I
it.
use mine.
2 questions left. Couldn't that be? Are we missing something? Randy, have you got me straight? Okay. Did I throw an extra question? Other than water and open space, what do you see as the city's greatest challenge, and how would you address it? There are 2 left. Okay. They were stuck together. Alan DeVille.
Well, besides those, which are very challenging, it's continuing to have economic development. We need to do that on a regional level with cooperation with the other entities in the area. And I believe that because, first of all, it's cheaper for us not to have our own economic development coordinator, director, whatever they want to be called for the day. It's important that we have people from all of the entities trying to attract those types of industries here to the region. It has been said from one of the previous questions, if it locates somewhere else, what's the benefit to the city? And I believe that there is, as has been answered, much benefit to the city in terms of the ability for people to get jobs, better wages, more money spent in the city, more money built for building homes. That, to me, is how we achieve that. Now, how to get to that point? Well, we have to talk. We have to continue to talk. When we're talking about economic development from the standpoint of the jobs, to me, it's the fact that we have to find a way to get together with all the other entities and not to fight. To me, we have to talk to them. We have to attract them with the ideas of how we all benefit from that. Now, as far as retail goes, that's a tough nut to crack because of the sales tax issue. Again, we'd have to continue to talk, to say, what kind of an input are we providing? How is that attraction actually getting the retail here? And to what degree do we share the tax among the entities that contributed to drawing that here? Same goes, of course, for the entities that want to...
Thank you, Alan. Alan, would you like to sign that question?
How about Lindsay?
Lindsay Bell.
Thank you. I agree with Alan that the next biggest challenge is to revitalize the local economy. And I think the way we do that is to ramp up an economic development program, a comprehensive economic development program that not only works to attract new business that'll bring good, high-quality jobs, but also works on business retention and expansion, helping existing businesses in the community stay here and stay strong and grow. Targeted redevelopment opportunities. Some of you who are longer-term residents remember Ponderosa Plaza. It was retooled and redeveloped into Village in the Boulders. There are other opportunities to do that. We also have to maintain the expansion of retail development because that's how we maintain our sales tax base. And of course, the last piece of a comprehensive economic development program is promotion of tourism. And probably our best opportunity for that is ecotourism for the future.
Thank you, Lindsay. Would anybody else like to opt in? No opt-ins. Okay. Take all your kisses back. Everybody's back in. Okay? Next question. In today's paper, it was mentioned that ADOT has approved a $400,000 grant for public transportation being combined with federal transit money with a collaborative effort by Chino Valley Transit and New Horizons Independent Living Center in Prescott Valley. Do you see a collaborative effort by the City of Prescott to support regional transportation? And if so, what would that be and how would you make it happen? If not, why? Do you understand that question?
No.
Would you like me to read it again?
Yes.
Okay. In today's paper, it was mentioned that ADOT has approved a $400,000 grant for public transportation being combined with federal transit money with a collaborative effort by Chino Valley Transit and New Horizons Independent Living Center of Prescott Valley. Do you see a collaborative effort by the City of Prescott program, and if so, what would that be and how would you make it happen? If not, why? Gene Wilcox, you knew this was coming, didn't you?
I knew it was coming. I do see a collaborative effort by the city to join in the development of a regional transportation network. But it should not be the city's burden alone to do that. I moved from a community where I was on the ground floor of starting a regional transportation system. I was the lawyer for the district initially, and now it's Flagstaff. There's a very successful transportation system that currently operates now after about 15, 17 years. It takes a while, but there is federal money available for supporting regional transportation systems in spite of sequestration and all that. It still remains a policy of the federal government to support alternative transportation to the use of the automobile, consumption of oil and gas, and all that. I think the city of Prescott can collaborate with the other entities, encourage the creation of a regional transportation district. It is a separate taxing district, so the city would not bear the burden, the tax burden of being a partner in that. But the city can certainly be a voice in the development of a transportation district.
Thank you. Gene, would you like to assign that question to another candidate?
I'd like to assign it to Steve Blair.
I appreciate that. I would say, from my standpoint, I think the city's involvement should be acting as a clearinghouse to get the private entities together that provide transportation in this community. As I've grown up here, I have seen an influx, not only from the Pioneer Home, from the Arizona state side, to every individual care center, every individual Tender Hearts, every individual caregiving company that offers van services throughout the region. Those are the ones that need to be together, getting federal dollars to provide the transits for people that need a lift. It's not the city's job. The funding mechanism is not there. Certainly, I think we can act as a door to open for all these people to come together and each one of them fund their own portion of those systems, and it should be left in the private sector, not in the city of Prescott's hands.
Thank you, Steve. Greg Lozelle.
Thanks, Malcolm. This comes up quite a bit with me talking to folks, and if there truly is a need for public transportation, I think the $400,000 that's great that they gave us that $400,000, but that's going to be gone in a month. From what I perceive, what the vision of public transportation, maybe it'd be a bus or a monorail or what have you, but it's mass. And my wife used to ride the trolley around town. That was her public transportation. But what I'm hearing is from Chino to PV to here, to start with, we need partners in all those towns, committed partners. I believe that this is a bigger issue than 7 people. It needs to go to the voters. It needs to be a referendum. It has to be a source-funded, it has to be a tax. I mean, we got to know we got the money there. And I personally feel once you put that out there, it probably would not pass.
Thank you. Lindsay Bell.
I was very pleased to see the article in the newspaper because I have been working with Chino Valley Transit and New Horizons Independent Living Center to help make this a reality. The grant right now is a rural transit grant because Chino Valley is still considered rural, whereas Prescott and Prescott Valley are semi-rural or semi-urban. We do have a great plan that has been developed by the Regional Transportation Planning Entity, the Central Yavapai MPO. It is a doable, realistic, affordable plan. I'm hopeful that the Chino Valley expansion and the partnership with New Horizons will eventually grow into a regional transit system. There have been federal monies available to this area for the last 10 years. What is required to bring in those federal dollars and to set up a system is local match. The dollars needed are very reasonable if you partner several governments together to do that.
Thank you, Lindsay. Great. You want to take another shot at it?
I would. To get in bed with the federal government is insane. The money dries up, there's a lot of politics on that level. It needs to be sustained here locally, and we gotta know from the voters, because we don't have it in our general fund. There's just not, the pie's not that big. And it depends on state or federal, when they hold that carrot over you, in any given year, when you don't pass some sort of law that they get mad at, they yank it out from underneath you, and then you're stuck with 50 employees that you can't afford, a bus system that you can't afford, gas, fuel, insurance. It has to be sustained, and it would have to come through its own source of revenue. And I only see it as part of the sales tax. And that's how I see it. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to add to this? Okay, Gene Wilcox.
Greg, we're already in bed with the federal government. I'm sure you've heard of ARA, the Recovery Act. I think our community has benefited greatly from the use of those funds, as have many communities across the United States, to restore the infrastructure that was left to deteriorate during prior administrations. So I would not turn my back on the opportunity to get federal money. We all pay federal income taxes, and let's get something for our buck.
Okay, anybody else? Well, that is the end of our prepared questions, and we do have some time for questions from the audience. Okay, would anybody from the audience like to ask a question? There you are. Introduce yourself and ask the question. And we'll do the same format. You can direct it to one or direct it to one, and we'll have the same format.
My name is Roger Thomas, and I know this is an emotional question, but what is the opinion of replacing the hotshot crew now that we've just lost with either another crew or to abandon the project altogether? And I'd like to address that to the mayor to start with.
Mal, run the question again, can you please?
Okay, what is the city's intention in replacing the hotshot crew? Do we have intentions of going forward with a new hotshot crew, or how are we going to handle that?
That's not even a matter of discussion yet. This has been such a traumatic thing for the council and for the whole community that it's more than just going and hiring 19 people. It took 5 years to reach the point that this was a first quality crew, and so there's a lot more to it. A part of the hotshot crew is in the off season doing cleanup and cutting down and making areas defensible. And then we were the only community in the whole United States municipality that had a complete crew, and they were gone most of the time during the fire season. They were not in the state of Arizona. So the community, the fire department, we're going to have a lot of conversation to make sure that that's what the community wants, and also what the fire department wants, because our fire department is still totally intact, because the 20 members of this crew were not a part of the everyday fire department. So the season now is with the rain coming, we're pretty much out of the danger for this year. But it'll be conversation, it'll be community conversation, and that the decision we make will be, we hope will be the right one.
Would anybody else like to add to that? Len?
Yes, I would. If you noticed, and it has been a traumatic 2 weeks, the council the other day voted 7-0 to postpone any expenditures on an administration building until we've had an opportunity to have both the city manager and the fire chief come in and tell us what they really would like to do. They run that particular group. And if we should be looking at budget items and transferring dollars that were appropriated in the budget for furniture and fixtures and equipment for an administration building, or do we need to use that money and reallocate it to whatever the decision of our fire chief and city manager, along with council approval, is going to do for the future? And should we hold off doing any expenditures of what I just mentioned, furniture and fixture for an administration building, and we don't have anybody out there to administer other than the bosses. So we want to hear from both the city manager and the fire chief as to what their plans are.
All right, Alan DeBeal.
Although I believe that it's too early to try to answer your question with a yes or no about reestablishing the hotshot crew, it still leaves us as a community with the fact that we have lots of areas in the city and adjacent to the city with brush on hillsides. Just look at the north face of Palmer Hill, for example. To me, it's the opportunity now, while we have the rains, and then we'll have the winter and the spring before we get into a fire season, to ensure that the private property in the city has that brush cleared off. Now, prior to the tragedy, of course, during that time the hotshot crew would be available, but it still leaves all of the private enterprise in this city to get out there and be hired to do that. A fire crew, volunteers even, to clean up the open space and the brush that's all around that.
Thank you, Alan. Steve Blair.
Yeah, I think that the time will come when the fire department, through the chief of the fire department, as well as the wildland chief and others, get with the city council to determine the course of direction. But personally, if you want to take the opportunity to drive to Yavapai Hills and look down over the ranch of Prescott and understand what the hotshot crew does in the off-season as far as clearing defensible space to your million-dollar homes and the valuations in this community to protect our city, it's huge. Those guys in the off-season work with Southview, Northview, all the different communities in Prescott, with the residents of the city of Prescott, assessing their properties and making them safe. I look forward to the day when we utilize Tony Shaka and Darrell Willis and Todd Rhines of the world to rebuild, like we did the first time, a quality group of people, not only to make Prescott safe, but also to be out there in the front line of fighting fires.
Thank you. Any other offense for that? Right. Let's do another question. Please introduce yourself and pose the question.
Thank you. My name is Rex Mason. I haven't heard anything tonight really about the deteriorating infrastructure that we have in the city. And over the last decade, I've heard various numbers varying from $100 million worth of infrastructure that is deteriorating to as much as $400 to $500 million worth of infrastructure. I'd like to hear somebody address the question of best guess at how much infrastructure really is deteriorating in terms of dollar value, and then how that compares with other priorities in the city. And I think everybody can opt in. So let's start with Mr. Blair, please.
Well, I think that number keeps fluctuating, and it was a big number, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million over a period of time. And what we've done over the past several years is we've addressed those issues by creating new water tanks. We have 6 new water tanks in the city of Prescott that's actually tripled the water storage capacity, and also, by the way, lowered the fire rates in those communities because there's better pressure to the fire hydrants, there's better pressure to the systems. We've also energized a huge project which has to do with Sundog Ranch Treatment Station, as well as completely rebuilding the one at the airport to better handle the sewage. We have done a great job, and there's still room for improvements. It's never time to stop with conservation. But what we are doing is replacing these lines as we go underneath the streets. And I mentioned earlier, you have a $5.8 million road project in Elks, or in Park Avenue. And that replaces all the old sewer lines that are 60 years old, all the water lines. Those are individual house water lines, as well as regular mains that go down the middle of the street. We're working on replacing manholes and service lines in the creeks to keep the sewage from overflowing, going into the lakes. It's a huge project. It's not fun. It's not fuzzy because you don't see a whole lot of benefit out of it, because it's not parks and it's not trails, but it's something that we have taken on in a long-range plan. We do have a plan, and we're conquering that plan every single year. So I would say that number right now is probably down by a third. We've been very aggressive with replacing these services and the pump stations and everything else in the past 5 years that I know of, and we will continue to do that.
Would anybody like to add to that?
Can we get a kiss?
Gene Wilcox.
Thank you. Rex, I don't have an answer as far as the current state of dollar amount of deteriorating infrastructure, but I do think the city ought to look at ramping up its repair program and financing it through bonds, which we could ask the voters to approve. And over a long period of time, those are slowly paid back, in the same way that the city bought Willow and Watson Lake. That would give us a jump start on making some of those very needed repairs to the sewer, water, and roads.
Good. Anybody else? Alrighty, we are going to start with our closing statements, and of course we'll just start at the other end. And Jane, you get the last opt-in, but we're gonna 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thanks. I would love to be on the council, to be part of the time in Prescott's history when we're turning the corner and coming up with creative solutions to solving problems without raising taxes. Realistically, there may need to be some minimal increases in taxes, but I do believe there are a lot of creative solutions out there that we haven't tapped. And what we need to do is look at other communities and compare our practices with their practices, their experiences with ours. It's called a best practice study. And I think we'll find that we can come up with ways of doing things that won't cost a lot of extra money. It's important that we look ahead to the future. As I said at the beginning, we need to think for generations beyond ourselves. I'm a retiree. I know there are many retirees in this community, but there are others who follow us. And it's our obligation to nurture our young and make sure they have a good quality of life in the future.
Are we closing it now?
Yes, we are.
At my age, I don't think about tomorrow too much. I'm more concerned about what happens in the city 25 years from now. What is it going to look like? Is it going to be a great city for young people to come and find the opportunities? I don't take a minute that I have an opportunity to bend somebody's ear down in Phoenix and in Washington about how Prescott in the future needs a 4-year degree granting private state college that offers degree programs, liberal arts, business administration, but we need a 4-year institution here that gives kids an opportunity to get an education without having to go to a rah-rah high school football game, cheerleaders or whatever at big universities with 80,000 students. And I think we need the university to provide the workforce that we're going to need for the growth that's going to potentially come to Prescott. Embry-Riddle right now is in the middle of a hunt with the federal government to be one of the 6 spots in the country for unmanned aircraft flights. That means you can take a jetliner full of equipment, fly it to Japan without a pilot, but they're going to need a tremendous amount of ground backup, software, mathematics, logarithms, the thing that a university like Embry-Riddle can provide, and I would give them all of the support that we can so that they become one of the 6 finalists and get to be one of the centers for this great program that's going to happen. We're not going to recognize what the world is like. Hey guys, I didn't have a cell phone growing up or this other stuff. I didn't even have a television set. But it's amazing what's happened through technology in the last 20, 25 years. And unmanned flight is going to be part of it.
Greg Mazzell.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to conclude by saying that, and I'm trying to say this as humbly, I am gifted with common sense, which is lacking these days. I also have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I listen twice as much as I talk. Some of my friends would contest that. But what I keep hearing, and I talk to my friends in Phoenix, and they are so envious of everybody that lives in Prescott, including myself, and they're trying to find some way to move up here, and I've had a couple friends do that in Phoenix. I want people to remember, as a council member, we set a tone of what kind of town we live in. We're not in charge of the educational system, but we gotta remember, there was just a study done that we ranked top 10 in Arizona for young families to move here, to live here. We gotta keep remembering what kind of town we have and keep boiling to the surface all the negativity. We have a town with, I can't believe the volunteers we have in this town, okay? We have a retirement community here. This supplies an economic engine to this town. And when somebody says we don't have skilled jobs here, look at the medical industry that helps support the retired community here. Doctors, nurses, office assistants. That's a huge impact here. We also have 3 educational institutions. We don't have somebody right out of high school teaching at those classes. I mean, we have educated folks as teachers and educators in those areas. We've got great school systems. We've got to stop forgetting what we have here, and I would like to perpetuate that tone that we do that. Thank you.
L.A. Longmark.
Thank you. One of the things that is important for a council to remember is that they're responsible for the overall operation of the city and to providing a vision for that city's future. And we can't be short-sighted and just thinking about, we do need to budget our balance, but just thinking about, just preserving infrastructure. We need to build businesses, we need to build jobs, we need to do what people cannot do for themselves, which is to protect the water that they drink, protect their environment for future generations, to ensure their safety and welfare. And that includes everything from water quality, roads, infrastructure, medical services, emergency services, as well as a wonderful surrounding and a place to work. And most important of all, you need to have council members who are willing to work together to find common ground and compromise to move forward. And I think there are a lot of choices today and a lot of good candidates to look at, but to me that's the most important quality in what I would look for in future leadership. Thank you.
Alan DeBeal.
Well, I hadn't mentioned this before. This is my 4th attempt at council, and I'm still using the same technique of going door to door and discussing when people do want to discuss what issues they're concerned with. And I hear a lot about how they'd like an open, transparent government. Beyond that, however, they want to see that there is among the candidates, as well as then the council members, some cooperation, some collaboration, some compromise, in order to move in a direction that's going to be best for the future of the city. To me, that shows that they have a consideration of what is happening now that is not positive. It needs to change, as I have said in the opening remarks about having, and myself being a conduit for people's input to consider what they said. The question was posed about, well, what happens if, let's say, half the people think one way and half the other? Well, to me, that's where you bring in that collaboration and compromise. And you modify things, and if you get 50% of the people who first opposed it, and 50% of the people who were for it together under one solution, then I think you've got the best solution that is possible. But of course it takes, again, the people to come together, to provide the kinds of input that is necessary to be considered, to have their questions answered, to move forward with a government that's going to consider what's said and not just have their minds made up when they're already going into a voting session. And that takes, again, the study session prior to that to allow that time. It also takes a lot of time to have information put out early so people will have the ability to consider in the long term. And let's not have agendas for executive sessions that no one knows what they're actually
Thank you,
going to
Al.
talk about.
Steve Blair.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for spending your evening with me, with us, to hear what we're all about. One thing that we tend to often not think about, and something I was very focused on when I was first elected back in 1998, and when I had fire department personnel as well as police personnel and people at the city of Prescott that said, you know, we have a problem. We're compressing our pay raises, our step ladders have gone away, we haven't been looked at about what our wages should be based upon the different communities that are around us. That study should happen about every 10 years. It's been 13 years since that study's taken place. And whenever I have somebody from the police department say I'm a sergeant and the guys that are new hires are making more than I am and I'm a supervisor, or a captain on a fire truck that says we're hiring a new fireman, first line firemen that are making more money than the guys supervising them, we have a problem. And I think what we need to do now is also focus on setting money aside to revisit that study, to reevaluate our citizens that we call employees of the city of Prescott, and make sure that they're getting a just due in the jobs that they serve, and reevaluate whether those jobs are still important in this community, whether we need to do away with the jobs that are no longer relevant, and add jobs that are now relevant. Our world changes, so the job classifications and structures, and we need to be very keen to that. And it's time. It's been over 10 years, so that would be one of my focuses if reelected to city council, is to, in the next budget year, put the money in place to do evaluation of all our employees in the city of Prescott. And I will continue to focus on what's near and dear to my heart, and that's the Verde River, the water situation in Prescott, Arizona, and trying to understand what is real and to make sure that we do not end up with an issue in the future when I'm gone, and certainly when Leonard's gone, for my kids that were born and raised here, to be able to enjoy the very environment that I enjoy. We're going to grow, but let's grow to where we all can get along. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Nicely timed, by the way. Marlon Kirkendall.
Well, thanks for a good job tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here and giving us an opportunity to let you take a peek at us. 4 years ago, I was honored to be elected your mayor, and it's been a great 4 years for me. Our first chore to get done was to get out of the courthouse with SRP, and that went along very well. And since then, we've been working on tourism, because we made a decision that that's where we could the fastest start generating more sales tax by getting more people to come and enjoy the assets with us, spend their money while they were here, and then they could go back home. We're now embarking on the second leg of the stool, and that's economic development. For this last 4 years, I've been your economic development director. That's part of my everyday. Tourism is working well. We have a good tourism director. And now then, today, there was interviews with prospective economic development managers for the city. We call it economic initiative, and we'll be moving that direction real soon. There will be regional economic development, but we also have to remember that the 4 communities here have very distinct differences, and we need to make sure that we direct the prospects to the area that they will fit in and the area will fit with them. So we're looking forward to the next 2 years. I would ask for your vote, and the door is open every day. The phone still works, and I would welcome any suggestions from any of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marlon. Lindsay Bell.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming out tonight and hearing what the candidates have to say on the issues. We appreciate your time. And also thank you to Yavapai County Contractors Association and your other partners in sponsoring tonight's forum. It's always good for voters to get an opportunity to hear from the candidates. As I said earlier this evening, it's time to step up to leadership, and I'm hopeful that you'll step up with Lindsay Bell. People tell me that it's dangerous for a candidate to make promises, but I'm going to jump in anyway. I have some promises that I'll make you. If I'm elected, I promise to do my homework try to research and understand the issues so that I can make the best informed decisions possible. I promise to encourage citizen inclusion and citizen participation in government. I think that's incredibly important. I promise to promote transparent, open government and ratchet down those executive sessions as much as possible. I promise to bring all voices and all perspectives into the public policy debate. I truly believe that you get the best public policy when all of those voices are heard and have a chance to be blended in the final result. After doing all of that, I promise to, with my vote, to make the best choice of the alternatives before us, make the decision that in my heart and based on the research, I think is in the best interest of the entire community. I have the skills, I have the experience, I have the commitment, and I certainly have the passion to serve as your mayor and to help build a strong future for our hometown. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let's have a hand for these candidates.